Okay. I talked about doing Hall of Fame profiles and superstar profiles. I want to start with Hasek. I want to start with Hasek for two reasons. One off, the guy's a Hall of Famer, absolutely 100% Hall of Famer. And two, there's always that debate of who the greatest goaltender in history is. And there are people who believe that it's Hasek. There are some, including myself, that say Raw. There are some that say it's Brodeur. And there are some who'd say Ken Dryden looking way back, or Johnny Bauer, or Terry Sawchuk, or it's an argument that doesn't have a right answer. But the argument can be made that Hasek came over later in his career than he would have if he'd been playing now. He's drafted in the 10th round by the Chicago Blackhawks, 199th overall in 1983. What a steal. But there's an asterisk to this because at the time that he's drafted, there's an Iron Curtain. Players don't just come over from the Czech Republic, because it was Czechoslovakia at the time, and it's a country that doesn't exactly let players leave. Just ask the Stastny brothers. They had to leave like thieves in the night to become Quebec Nordiques. So for Hasek, he spends the first 7 years of his professional career playing in the Czech Republic. Now, between playing before and then going back after his NHL career when he's older, much older, he plays 351 games in the Czech League and has a goals against average of 2.76. I don't have other numbers. Some numbers from some of these leagues are kind of hard to come by, especially when you're looking in the early 80s from the Czech League. He's a very solid player, though, and it's known from early on. Early on, as a kid, everybody knows this guy's special. And as a player for the Czechoslovakian League, and I keep wanting to say Czech Republic, as a player in the Czechoslovakian League, he's getting awards for being the best goaltender, for being best player, for being the best Czech player of the century in 1988. Like this Hasek kid is special. Completely unknown on this side of the pond. He's a Blackhawks prospect, and he's stuck behind Eddie the Eagle. So Ed Belfour is the absolute best goaltender in Chicago and one of the best goaltenders in the league. What's remembered with Hasek is the poke check in the playoffs against Mario. Chicago's getting destroyed by Pittsburgh, and what are we talking about? Hasek. Goalie comes skating way out towards the blue line to poke check Mario Lemieux. Insane. He puts up, in 5 games in 1991, he has 3 wins and a tie, 2.46 goals against, 914 save percentage. There's nothing there that makes anybody say, this guy's the future. 91-92, he's a backup, plays 20 games, 10 wins, 4 losses and a tie, 2.60 goals against, 893 save percentage. So the save percentage isn't stellar, goals against isn't stellar. Chicago's an excellent team. Hasek, good goalie, unorthodox. Unorthodox is the only way to describe the way this guy swims around on the ice making saves. I talked about Thomas yesterday. I'm talking about Hasek today. 2 very unorthodox goaltenders. Now, keep in mind, this is already 9 years after his draft year. So he's probably as good as he's going to get, is what Chicago's likely thinking. Now we have expansion and all this wonderful stuff going on. So you know what? Chicago's willing to move him. So they move him on August 7th of 1992 to Buffalo for Stefan Beauregard and a 4th-round pick that becomes Eric Daze. And that's an official trade. There's other things that happen too, but that's the official trade, and it's very lopsided, isn't it? Stefan Beauregard. Well, Beauregard at the time was a well-thought-of backup goaltender, so was backup for backup in the eyes of many. There's nothing in the stats to say that Hasek's going to become Hasek. 92-93, he plays 28 games, 11 wins, 10 losses, 4 ties, 3.15 goals against, 896 save percentage. So again, the numbers do not dictate that he's going to be Dominik Hasek. It's just, he's a good goaltender, seems like a nice guy, good veteran, good backup for the Sabres to have around. Sabres are a decent team. Yeah, this Hasek guy is not bad. Who knows what he'll turn into. Now, keep in mind, he's now 10 years past his draft year, so he's in his late 20s. And he's played 53 games in the NHL. So that's another comparison I can make to the Thomas video I made yesterday, which is that Hasek starts slow. He's older when he finally hits the big time in the NHL. And the big time arrives in 93-94. He's a first-team All-Star and a Vezina Trophy winner. 58 games, 30 wins, 20 losses, 6 6 ties, 1.95 goals against, and a .930 save percentage. He is the first goaltender since 1974 to post a goals against below 2.00. It's an insane number. During the 80s, we never thought we'd see a goaltender get below 2.5, much less 2.0. And here he is, 1.95. And he is a brick wall for a Sabres team that, honestly, without him, may not even be a playoff team. 94-95, he does it again. First team All-Star Vezina winner, despite only playing 41 games. Keep in mind, it's a 48-game schedule. Gotcha. 19-14-7 record, 2.11 goals against, .930 save percentage. Back-to-back seasons of .930. Proving that the 93-94 season, not a fluke. And that happens. You'll see a goaltender have a fantastic season. Jose Theodore comes to mind. Jim Carrey comes to mind. And then they just aren't able to follow that up. And that does happen. Didn't happen with Hasek. Hasek follows it up with another amazing season in 94-95. Playoff success is elusive for the Buffalo Sabres. 95-96, he plays 59 games, 22 wins, 30 losses, 6 ties, 2.83 goals against, .920 save percentage. So now he's not a Vezina Trophy winner or a first or second team All-Star in the NHL. The luster kind of comes off during that season, but again, without him in Buffalo, how much worse is it? Yeah, he's below 500, but without him in net, how much worse would it have been for Buffalo? Well, obviously, missing the playoffs and not seeing his name on a trophy and not seeing his name on the first team All-Star list bothers him, because 96-97 is just one of those years. 67 games played, 37 wins, 20 losses, 10 ties, 2.27 goals against, .930 save percentage. He's a first-team All-Star. He wins the Vezina. He also wins the Pearson and the Hart, which means that writers said he's the best player, most valuable player in the league, and the players said he's the best player in the league. It is very difficult for a goaltender to win a Pearson. Very difficult for players to say the best guy in the league right now is that goaltender. So it says a lot for just how strong a season he had that year. The following year, 97-98, he wins all of the same trophies again. 72 games played, 33 wins, 23 losses, 13 ties, 2.09 goals against, and a .932 save percentage. .932. So here's .930, which we think is probably the high bar, and then he actually improves it while playing 72 games in an 82-game schedule. He does not get very many nights off. And yet, he maintains excellence throughout. And in the playoffs, his numbers do not suffer, despite the fact he's playing a ton of time. 98-99, 64 games played, 30 wins, 18 losses, 14 ties, 1.87 goals against, .937 save percentage, and he's a first-team All-Star again, and a Vezina winner again. So for people keeping track, that's 5 Vezinas in 6 years, and he's going to make it 6 Vezinas in 8. It's an impressive record. And you can look back and you can find other goaltenders that post a lot of Vezinas, but how many of those are after it was voted upon? And how many of those were when it was just goals against average? And my guess is that if the Vezinas back then had been voted upon, you would have had completely different winners. By winning the Vezina in 98-99 and having that 1.87 goals against average, which is crazy good, that run to the Stanley Cup final that year was magical for Buffalo. And of course, it's tainted now by the goal that wins the Stanley Cup. But I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss the career of this man who makes Buffalo a contender by himself. There were some very good players on the team. I'm not trying to slag the whole Sabres roster, but without Hasek, they're not a contender. They don't go to the Stanley Cup final. 99-2000, he plays 35 games, 15 wins, 11 losses, 6 ties, and overtime losses. Overtime losses start getting counted in that column as of this season. 2.21 goals against, .919 save percentage. No awards to him. Now, he's 17 years clear of his draft year, meaning he's starting to get older. We're viewing a guy now that, he's probably about done. Probably about done. So what does he do in 2000-2001? He plays 67 games, 37 wins, 24 losses, 4 overtime losses or ties, 2.11 goals against, .921 save percentage. And then Buffalo is forced to do what they don't want to do with a guy who just won a Vezina and got first-team All-Star. They trade him to Detroit. Detroit Red Wings have tried with Curtis Joseph and failed, and they want to give a shot now to Dominik Hasek, who people understand is on the back nine of his career because he's too old to be on the front nine. So, with that in mind, the Detroit Red Wings give Vlad Kozlov and a first-round draft pick that becomes Daniel Paille and future considerations that I don't think were ever turned into anything, as far as I can tell, as far as I can find, on June 30th of 2001. So the day before July 1st, he is traded to Detroit. And Detroit says, thank you very much. While he never becomes an all-star, like a league all-star again, he plays all-star games, I believe. I believe he played a couple. But he's not a league all-star, first or second team. He plays 65 games in 2001, 2002, 41 wins, 15 losses, 8 overtime losses or ties, 2.17 goals against, 915 save percentage. Do you know what's nice for Hasek? He's on the back nine. He's winding down his career. He doesn't have to be Superman. Unlike in Buffalo, he doesn't have to be a brick wall. He just has to not allow that third goal. He has to just make sure that when it's tied that he shuts things down. He can be to Detroit what Grant Fuhr was to the Edmonton Oilers in the 80s. A much lower scoring time than it was for the Oilers in the 80s, but that same idea. He doesn't have to be a superstar. He just has to be good. And he's very good. And they win the Stanley Cup that year, and he wins all 16 games. He's pretty darn good in that run. And what does he do? June 25th, 2002, he says, well, I retire. He's done. He's not. July 8th of 2003, he unretires. Plays a grand total of 14 games that year, 8 wins, 3 losses, 2 ties, overtime losses, 2.20 goals against, and a 907 save percentage. So it doesn't work out the way that he wants it to. They don't win a Stanley Cup that year. And, you know, it's one of those things where when you're getting a guy who's at that stage in his career, you're going to be dealing with a higher risk of injury. And Hasek, looks like he's probably done, except that he signs with the Ottawa Senators. So the Senators, another team that's desperate for a Stanley Cup, much like Detroit was when they got him. Ottawa and Detroit's greedy, being desperate for a Stanley Cup when they'd only won one few years earlier. But Ottawa desperately needs that last piece, and it's seen that goaltending's that last piece. So Hasek is signed in 2004, and the whole season's gone. It's like the NHL conspired against Ottawa and went, you guys have a really excellent shot at winning the Cup. We're just not going to have a season. 2005, 2006, he plays for Ottawa, which is easy to forget. In the grand scheme of things, it is really easy to forget that Dominik Hasek did play a season in Ottawa. Had 28 wins, 10 losses, 4 overtime losses, 2.09 goals against average, and a 925 save percentage. 925 in 43 games. His health, though, and injuries, and it doesn't end up having a happy ending. And at the end of that, he's like, okay, and he goes back to Detroit. So the Detroit Red Wings get him back in 06-07. He plays 56 games, 38 wins, 11 losses, 6 overtime losses, 2.05 goals against, and a 913 save percentage. Pretty darn good. Detroit does not win a Stanley Cup that year, but Hasek isn't really the reason they don't win it. And remember, we are now 24 years clear of Hasek being drafted. That's insane. 2007-2008, his final season at the NHL level, plays 41 games, 27 wins, 10 losses, 3 overtime losses, 2.14 goals against, 902 save percentage. He wins the Stanley Cup. He only gets 2 wins on that Stanley Cup run. Chris Osgood ran the show the rest of the way. And it was clear he was done, so he retired June 9th of 2008. And then he unretired sort of kind of on April 21st of 2009, deciding to play in the Czech League again. So he ends up playing those 351 games in the Czech League, and some of those are after he's retired from the NHL. His playoff record, 65-49, 2.02 goals against, and a 925 save percentage. Excellent numbers. He has 389 career wins, 223 losses, 95 ties or overtime losses, 2.20 goals against, and a .922 save percentage. In his career, his save percentage is second. He's also number 2 in games played by a European goalie with 735. He's number 6 all-time in shutouts with 81 over this career, including a couple seasons. I think he had 2 years where he had 10 or more. He's number 11 overall in wins in NHL history, and he had the most shutouts in a month. And I believe that's in 97-98. He had 6 in 1 month. That's roughly 2 a week. That's crazy. That's an insane amount of shutouts. If Hasek plays 7 years later, if he's born 7 years later and has that same career, he's over in the NHL that much sooner. He dominates that much sooner, and he's likely over 5, maybe even 600 wins. With another 7 in the NHL, he could have been up to 500 or 600 wins. It's an incredible career, and again, I can understand the argument being made he's the greatest of all time. I have no problem with that whatsoever. None. All of the numbers back him up. He drags a team that's not very good on paper to a much better record and standing than they really have any right having, and drags them to a Stanley Cup final that, you know, they were against a better team, but they really could have won it. And they could have won it because of him. So there you go. The career of Dominik Hasek, the first in a series that I'm going to do on superstar players in the NHL. And it's going to be guys who are in the Hall of Fame, so I don't need to put them in my Hall of Fame. That would be weird, so I'm not doing that. But it is interesting to look at a guy's career, and again, it's easy to forget that 1 year in Ottawa, isn't it? And that he signed in Ottawa before the lockout season killed him. And then Ottawa exercised their option to keep him for that 05-06 season. They could have let him go as a free agent. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.